friends, and welcome to the Go and Tell podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Greci. The Go and Tell podcast is a place where we chat all the things from life, motherhood, Jesus, food, health and wellness, and so much more. So grab a hot cup of coffee, kick back, and relax with us. I hope that you find joy, laughter, and encouragement today and every day. Thanks for being here. Hey friends, and welcome to the Go and Tell podcast with Lauren Greci. So as you can see, the name has changed from Lifestyle with Lauren podcast to the Go and Tell podcast. I am so excited for this and for this change because I feel that this title more aligns with what I am bringing you weekly, where we are sharing women's testimonies and how God has worked in their lives. So I am thrilled to bring you the new name, the Go and Tell podcast with Lauren Greci. So you will also hear me still say the Lifestyle with Lauren podcast over the next few episodes until everything gets up to date and things will completely match very soon. But in the meantime, please be patient and hopefully I don't completely confuse you. But thank you so much for coming back every week, for listening and sharing and liking and subscribing. I am so appreciative of you and thank you. Thank you so much. All right, welcome to the Go and Tell podcast with Lauren. Hey friends, welcome to the Lifestyle with Lauren podcast. I am so glad that you're here so you can hear my amazing conversation with my sweet friend, Nori-Lyn Alford. And it's in my closet. So we are chatted on an early Saturday morning. I have boys, I have kids. So the only quiet place for me to get away is, you guessed it, the closet. Usually a closet or a bathroom. I figured for you guys, the closet would be a better choice of the two. So Nori-Lyn shared her amazing health journey with me. She was diagnosed with a slew of things, let's put it that way, insulin resistance, diabetes, Pcos, PCOS, celiac, Hashimoto's, and then she also experienced COVID. So she shared just her amazing story, her health journey, and her testimony with us. And I cannot wait for you to hear it. So let's hop right in and have fun with my conversation with Nori-Lyn. Nori-Lyn, welcome to the Lifestyle with Lauren podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
This is a first.
That's right. Why don't you take a second and just kind of introduce yourself to everybody?
Well, I'm Nori-Lyn. I'm 39. My 40th is right around the corner.
So are you excited about turning 40?
Kind of. I feel like it's going to be the good decade. I feel like it's the decade I'm going to own my health and it's going to be better. So I think I'm kind of looking forward to that. I just don't want to say it.
Oh girl, I'm ready. I am ready to turn 40. I'm excited for being 40. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Well, go ahead. Keep introducing.
More of that. Let me think. So I'm married to Brian. We've been married for 15 years and together for just over 18. So it's pretty awesome. We have one child, Caleb, who's 13, fully embracing the teenage vibe.
Yes.
Great. And I love my child. And then we have our fur baby, Kiwi. I love my fur baby. I have my master's in ancient Egypt, so I am a history nerd through and through. I love it. And I work part-time from home. Right up until COVID, I was an event planner for our church, and there's not a huge need for event planning in a pandemic. So super grateful to have this new job working from home in the mornings. It's really fun. So.
That's good. That's awesome. Well, and I should state too that I am sitting in my closet because we are doing this at 9 a.m. So that means dogs are awake, children are awake. So it gets loud and noisy. And this is the only space where I'm like 3 doors in. Close the master bedroom door, close the bathroom door, close the closet door. And I'm hoping that we will be uninterrupted, but we shall see as we go. Okay, so we met through church. I'm trying to think, what was like the very first interaction? Like, how do you remember how we first, was it through Life Group, wasn't it?
It was through the Page Life Group.
Yeah.
We had been in a life group with them previously, and they split off, and we initially were asked to stay behind. But it was only like 6 months, and we just wanted to be with our friends. So we came over, and I believe you were there, and we didn't know you. And I was like, what are you doing? These are my people. Like, who are you? But it was great. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure walking into Life Group and seeing y'all for the first time.
Yes. Yeah. And ever since, I feel like we've just kind of hit it off. Like, we have a lot of similarities, and I just love talking with you because I feel like we're so similar in a lot of ways.
Oh, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Plus, you have really cute kids. So
that helps. I just throw them out there and be like, look at my cute kids. Be my friend. You mentioned you have one son, Caleb, but let's kind of back up, because if people can't pick it up, which I always pick it up, you are from Canada. So tell everyone kind of, yeah.
Oh, that should have been part of my introduction.
I know, you are a proud Canadian. So tell us a little bit about growing up in Canada and what it was like.
So I grew up on the prairies in Alberta. So I always say, if you just go straight north, you're going to kind of hit Manitoba. So then you got to go left. So we're right over Montana, Wyoming, all of that. I love Canada. It's just clean air and wide open spaces and trees. And actually, I grew up on the prairies. So we would really travel to the trees in the summer, but there's nothing I don't love about Canada.
Yeah.
I even love the cold. And when I was 14, my dad's company transferred him here to Dallas. And we spent a year kind of in limbo, where my mom and my brother and sister and I stayed in Canada, and he was working here and coming home. So right after I turned 15, he moved us here. It was the very end of grade 9 for me, which was junior high in Alberta. But coming here, I was in my sophomore year of high school. So I never had a freshman year.
Oh,
would have been helpful.
What was the transition like, going from a place that you still love dearly? So obviously that probably had to been a little bit upsetting to move from Canada, where you are surrounded by nature and prairies and trees and all that stuff, to a very, it's a downtown. Yeah, exactly. So what was that like for you during that time?
I did not handle it very well. It's a very difficult age to move for anyone, but I was the top of my game, so to speak. I was surrounded by friends who were giving me, I guess, the approval and stuff that I didn't necessarily have from my family. My parents are great. I love them, but I was like a big fish in a little pond to be a very tiny minnow in a very big pond. It was very hard. And I don't think it was until I was in my 20s that I realized how depressed I was through high school, but I put on the happy face and bounced my way through it. And I graduated and I ran back. I went back for my first year of college. So yeah, it's very different. My brother and sister's experience was a little different. They weren't necessarily loving life at the schools in Canada, and they got to start over when they got here. So
they had a different experience altogether. So then so you went back then, and then you came back again then. How did you go from graduating then, or getting back to the Dallas area?
So I'm a very independent soul. And after 1 year, well, probably halfway through my first year, I realized it was going to be very hard to be independent. Standard cost of living in Canada is a lot higher than it is here. I didn't want to go into debt with student loans. And despite being in the top 10 percentile here, I wasn't eligible for scholarships. We didn't have our green card yet. And going back to Canada, scholarships were based off of residency, and I didn't have residency there. So I was having to pay for it. And My dad didn't want me to work when I was up there. He didn't want to pay taxes in 2 countries. I didn't have a great understanding of that. So I decided to come back, and I went to the University of North Texas, and I was able to work and pay my tuition and graduate without loans. So, but coming back on my terms made it better.
Yeah.
It was, but my heart still yearns for the prairies.
Yeah. Where along this line, or how long after until you met your husband?
It was probably, I'm trying to think of the timeline. I came back in the summer of 2000, and I met him a year and a half later.
Okay.
And it was because my sister had met his brother, and within 6 months they got married. I hadn't met him until the rehearsal dinner, and that's when we met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know,
It
that's
was
a sweet story.
Clicked really quick.
Yeah. And then y'all's like courtship, engagement, wedding was how long? 2 years roughly?
2.5. And that was only because when we met, I was fixing to graduate, and I knew I was going to grad school, and I knew that wasn't going to be in Texas. And he was about to graduate and didn't know where he was going to work. So we basically had to wait for me to finish grad school. And very quickly, within, I think, 5 weeks of graduating grad school, we were married. So quickly as we could, I came back.
Yeah. Oh, that's sweet. You have a very amazing, though interesting, health journey. To see where you were and where you are now is really incredible. So I'm going to kind of shift gears and go from that. But I mean, talking about your son and the birth of your son as well, kind of, I think, intertwines with all of that as well, because I think that was also how you were able to diagnose some health problems yourself or with your doctors and stuff. So walk us through like that whole process. What happened in your health journey? How did you find out your different things that you're having to overcome and your whole journey with Caleb?
Sure.
Hey friends, would you do me a favor? Would you subscribe to the show by clicking that subscribe button wherever you're listening? It makes a huge difference for the Go and Tell podcast community. I would also love for you to share this show with a friend. I know some of you found this show because a friend recommended it to you, so thank you for listening and being here, for subscribing and sharing and showing all your love and support. Thank you. Music was created for the show by Matt Bowen, and I'm your host, Lauren Greci. Now let's rejoin the conversation.
So feel free to interrupt at any point. It's complicated and it's long. I was actually diagnosed very young with, they called it at the time pre-diabetes. I think now we call it insulin resistance. And I don't fully know what led to them diagnosing me with that. I just don't remember a time where I didn't know that I had that. But there wasn't a whole lot of information on what it was. Basically, my body doesn't handle insulin the way it's supposed to. My maternal grandmother and my maternal uncle have diabetes, and my dad, I think within the last decade, was diagnosed with diabetes as well. So there's clearly a genetic part of it. And I was always told it wasn't a matter of if, but a matter of when I developed full-blown diabetes. So the older I got, the harder I worked at understanding it and controlling it, because the better you control it, the longer you put it off. So I always had that. And so come probably about high school, I was really paying attention to my diet and my health. And my mom was always suspicious of processed foods, always. And it's not to say we didn't have it. It was never a mainstay in our diet. So she taught me how to cook from scratch and the joy of cooking. And I'm so grateful for that in everything that's to come too, but even just then to understand the importance of what you're putting in your body. So that was kind of my first baby step. And when I hit puberty, I started experiencing a lot of things that we didn't understand. So I was never had a regular cycle ever. Um, Maybe once every 3 months, maybe. And didn't ever cramp, and it was kind of a blessing, when you're younger. But my only goal in life was really to be a mom. So it was always in the back of my head, like, what does that mean for having babies? And then I started the emergency room visits. Ovarian cysts are no joke. They are awful. And I got them a lot, but it wasn't until I was married in 24 that I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And that's a hormonal disorder. It has a whole list of symptoms. And I was told at the time, I don't know if this has changed, that you need 5 things from that list in order to be diagnosed with PCOS. And I had way more than 5.
Really?
But yeah, the irregular cycles, the ovarian cysts. So I don't ovulate, which became problematic. The biggest one, even at my healthiest and at my most fit, I never had a flat stomach, and it used to mystify my trainers and everyone. And that was absolutely a part of the PCOS. I've always had belly fat, even at my tiniest, and it causes weight gain. It doesn't matter how well I eat, how much I exercise. I wish I had a t-shirt sometimes. It's like, it's not what I eat. Don't judge me. So yeah, that was that. And so I kind of thought that was it. I thought, okay, those two often go hand in hand. It's a chicken before the egg thing, PCOS and insulin resistance, which one causes which. I was super healthy. I was fit and active. I loved the gym when I was at college. And so when we got married, we went to Spain and would climb minarets, and I wouldn't even be breathless when we got to the top. So I was enjoying that. And then I got pregnant. And so we went.
So then how did you get pregnant when you have PCOS? Because you mentioned that you don't ovulate. So was that just a God thing, or were you actively trying to find ways with a doctor to get pregnant?
Well, definitely a God thing. So we'd only been married a year, and we knew we wanted kids. And so I went off of birth control, which was what I was told at the time, the only way to manage my PCOS. So there is no cure, there is no treatment, but going on to birth control actually gave me a monthly cycle. It's the only way I had that. It also helped. I would get a lot of pelvic pain and stuff, and it alleviated all those symptoms. So I went off of that, obviously, to get pregnant, and immediately stopped having cycles, nothing. So 5 months in, I called my doctor, and this is the God thing. She got me in immediately. She has PCOS, and she diagnosed me very quickly. And so this was like maybe June that I stopped the birth control. And by December, they were doing all of the tests and everything. And I started Clomid in January. And one round of Clomid did the trick. We got pregnant. So my fertility journey, the first round was successful very quickly. I didn't have that year-long battle. Most people have to try for 6 months before a doctor will even see them. So I know I'm blessed that she saw me so quick.
Right.
And it worked. First round, we were pregnant. We were so jazzed and so excited. And then I started getting nauseous. And my friends told me how great a sign that was, because it meant my hormones were increasing and it was a healthy pregnancy. So I would literally run to the toilet and be like, thank you, God, the whole way, and just so excited. But I was not aware that I had a very severe case of hyperemesis gravidarum. I don't know if you've heard of that. It is not morning sickness. If you look it up, so many people love to say it's just severe morning sickness. No, it's so much worse. By 6 weeks, I was in the emergency room for dehydration. A few weeks later, they were trying really hard to get me on Zofran. So at the time, Zofran was only used for cancer patients. It hadn't been fully approved for pregnancy. And since then, it's been taken away from pregnancy. But insurance wouldn't pay for it. It was like $100 a pill. So my doctor, she arranged
$100 a pill, not a bottle, a pill. Holy moly.
Yes. And my husband actually lost his job the same week we found out we were pregnant. So I was on Cobra, but $100 a pill was never going to happen.
Right.
So she knew a way around it with a pump, like a soft catheter pump that would deliver medication 24 hours into my body. But I had to first attempt it with the normal pregnancy drugs, Reglan and Phenergan, which we had already proved were not working for me. So after 2 weeks of doing that, and I was rapidly losing weight, they finally gave me the Zofran, and insurance paid for it completely.
Nice.
So I'm not sure. She knew the way around. I'm grateful. But it was too late. With the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, I lost 15 pounds. So they stuck me in the hospital at 12 weeks. I was throwing up bile. I wasn't keeping down water. I spent 3 days there, and they gave me a cocktail. That's what I call it. It's a constant rotation of Reglan, Phenergan, and Zofran. And I was on that until the hour I gave birth. And it was intense. It was bad. I couldn't talk for long. I would have to lie there in the dark listening to the TV, because even just watching it would make me sick. When I was able to get up and shower, I would throw up on myself in the shower. By about 16 weeks, my mom was pumping me full of pasta. She was like so determined. I put on my first pound, which was so exciting. And at 19 weeks, which is often the case with hyperemesis, I just woke up one morning and I felt better. I was not ever able to come off of my cocktail. Missing one dose was awful, but I could talk and go out and move and enjoy the pregnancy. And it was actually about that time that I got gestational diabetes. Not a surprise. I have insulin resistance. We knew it was coming. I credit it with saving my pregnancy, because I saw a nutritionist. They gave me a meal plan. I had to eat at certain times of the day. I had to be very careful with what I ate. And so the week Caleb was born, I had gained 19 pounds. So I don't think I could have done it otherwise.
No. Okay. So then you get through your pregnancy, you have Caleb, and what was your health journey then like after Caleb? Did you rebound rather quickly? Did you feel really good almost right away? What was that like?
It was immediate. Oh my gosh. I remember, you get to the point where you forget what normal feels like. And even though you hear everyone say that as soon as the baby's born, everything goes away, you kind of start to doubt. And immediately, I just felt like a new person. My friends say that I kind of bounced out of the hospital in a way that wouldn't be normal. Because even like post-labor, I felt so much better than I had in 9 months. And for the entire time I nursed Caleb, I felt so good. And he was an easy baby. He was so great. So it was a beautiful time. It wasn't until I stopped nursing him that we immediately knew something was wrong. So trauma can often trigger autoimmune issues. And my pregnancy was clearly a traumatic trigger for all of it. I didn't know for almost 4 years what was going on. But immediately after I stopped nursing him, I went back onto birth control for the PCOS, but that takes 3 months to kind of, get in and stabilize your hormones. And in that time, I gained almost 30 pounds before before that. And I'm hearing people saying, oh, but when you stop nursing, if you don't fix your diet, whatever. This was not the case. And it was not, it just exploded. Chronic fatigue set in immediately. And over time, by the time I was diagnosed, I would wake up in the morning. And before I even opened my eyes, I would kind of go through a mental checklist. Am I nauseous today? Am I lightheaded? Does anything hurt? My joints would hurt so bad that sometimes just like moving my pinky was, I would just start, I would move my pinky. Does that hurt? And then when I actually would get up, my feet would touch the floor and it was like I was standing on just hundreds of hot needles and trying to walk on that for the first 20 minutes. It was awful. I had a toddler that was my whole world. There were times that I would lay on the couch and he would be playing on the floor and I would just have my arm over the side of the couch on his head so he knew I was there. Or I would try to like zoom a Hot Wheel around or something, but my eyes were closed. It was hard. It was so hard. I think chronic fatigue is difficult for anybody, but when you have children, and it's not something that a lot of people understand.
Right.
So I have wonderful friends who knew when I got there that I was probably just going to slump on a chair or a couch and talk. But I did as much as I could. I took him out all the time. Every bit of energy I had went into getting him out of the house and on hikes and on walks and on outings. There just wasn't a lot left over.
Right.
So my husband is a saint. He's an absolute saint. And this is kind of where I would say when you know something's wrong, advocate for yourself. Don't stop. I went to so many doctors. One of them told me that my toes going numb was because I was getting older. I was 27. I never went back to him.
No.
It was awful. And I would not generally advocate Googling things because that can take you down rabbit trails. But I was actually watching TV one day and I was just channel surfing and I saw a talk show that I've never watched before. And I don't know why I stopped. Well, I do. God told me to stop. And a doctor was telling them about thyroid disease in women and how undiagnosed it is and how important it is to ask your doctors to check your thyroid. So I actually had an appointment with my OB-GYN that week.
Wow.
And I asked her to check my thyroid and she did the whole this and immediately sent me for ultrasounds and all the bits. They initially told me I had cancer and they were wrong. They did tell me that one other time.
That's like a horrible thing to say without knowing for sure,
I agree 100%. It's not a word you should throw around. I had a 4-year-old at the time, so that was pretty awful. And it ended up that I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. So just another hormonal imbalance. And then I self-diagnosed initially with celiac. I couldn't get any doctors. And what's really confusing to me is I have a family history of celiac. My grandmother, I had all the symptoms, but because it wasn't GI symptoms, it was the fatigue. That was where my joint pain and the feet tingling. And then also I would swell up. What the clothes I wore in the morning didn't fit me at the end of the day. I was walking with friends who were 9 months pregnant and people thought I was 9 months pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
Which was especially painful because at that point we had tried to have another baby and it didn't work for us a second time. So we had planned, our plans were to have 4 kids at least. God's plans were different, but to be constantly told by people that look pregnant and, oh, are you pregnant? And you're going through infertility is excruciating. It took a friend telling me about her friend that had symptoms like mine for me to try the gluten-free. My grandmother and my mom, who's gluten intolerant, have the GI symptoms. I'm like, oh, I don't have that. So I'm not that. And almost immediately saw an improvement. And it was at that point I sought out a GI doctor. So at that point, I had to see an endocrinologist to get it all straightened out. I'll never forget the first day that I met with him. He was like this, like this, hearing all my symptoms and all that, and trying to, the thing with autoimmune disease is so many of them share symptoms.
Right.
So when you're experiencing a flare up of one, it can be really hard to figure out which one is the problem. So he sorted me out. He fixed me. And so by the time Caleb started kindergarten, I was starting to figure it out. But it's a journey. It's a journey to figure out your body and what makes it feel better.
Right.
And you have a lot of people around you questioning how sick you really are.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's the tricky thing about autoimmune. And I see it so often where, like, I struggle with my own health issues and I look healthy. People go, well, you don't look sick. And it's like, you have no idea what's happening internally, and the exhaustion. Oh, that's just because you're a mom. You're just tired because you have a kid. It's like, no, this is so different than just mom tired. This is not that, but yeah, it's that, well, you look healthy.
Yeah. Oh, and I would hear that so often. And so if you dared to in any way imply that you still didn't feel good, then you kind of get the, well, she's just being dramatic, or she's whining, or she's whatever. I began to suffer from pretty severe anxiety and depression. And part of that was stuff going on outside of my health, but I don't think my health helped that.
Right.
And so I closed in my circle. I had to ask for help. I began seeing a counselor, which I also advocate for getting yourself outside help. And I was always giving, and I give my time. I can't afford to shower my friends in gifts and things, but I can give them me. And I was giving them a lot of me. And she really wanted me to step back and ask for some help. And I very quickly found out who my real friends were, because not only were they the ones that showed up, whether it was encouragement or actually I had friends show up and sweep my kitchen floor for me, but just those who didn't question why I was asking for help and why I needed it. And so I really closed myself off, and I had a very tight circle. And we changed churches at that point. We came to First Baptist, and it took me a while to open myself up to a new group of people. And I'm just so glad that I did. I have some of the best friends, you included, from this. But it's just learning to ask for help and listening to the good voices and getting rid of the toxic. It's so important. So it's very much a physical journey and a mental health journey altogether, for sure.
Have you ever done the Enneagram test? I ask this almost like on every podcast, I feel, but have you ever done that?
I have, and I wish I could tell you that I remember exact numbers. I just know it was always like the creative and the outgoing and the,
Yeah. I feel like you're also a little bit like me, because I'm a 2, and the 2 is that the giver, basically. It's the helper. Yes. It's the one who, thinks about everybody else first and then kind of thinks of themselves last, not intentionally, but it's just out of habit. It's just who you are. And I feel like you're a little bit of that too as well.
I feel like for me, it's my spiritual gift, probably for you too. When I do the spiritual gift surveys, hospitality is always, compassion is always up there. I feel like it's not something I can help, because that's what God is prompting me to do. And I love it. I absolutely love it. But it makes it really hard when that's how you're geared to have to step back. And, my health story just this past year has been a huge, like, you've got to accept help. And community is so important. It's so
Absolutely.
important. Yeah.
So before we talk about your health this past year, what would be something that if a new mom is feeling all the things that you're saying, actively, I think listening to yourself and continuing to seek and find answers is huge, and advocating for yourself. But is there any other tips or advice that you would give to a mom or anybody who's feeling the same things that you felt with autoimmune and celiac and all of that?
Well, I think, for me, it was a constant struggle between how do I be a good mom and do all the things and yet feel like this. I also, having a clean house is important to me. Cooking our meals is important to me. But there definitely comes a point where you just can't do it all. And so taking some of that pressure off of yourself as a mom to know that you don't have to do it all. And, I think my husband, he very much advocated for just while Caleb is awake, spend all your time with Caleb. And then housework and things like that can happen when he's asleep. But I was done by the time he was asleep. That wasn't possible. And then, you have friends who are kind of telling you the same thing. And it just always made me feel super guilty that I still wanted to cook and I still wanted the house to look okay. And I didn't think I was being neglectful of Caleb if I did give a little bit of myself to that. And so I would say take the pressure off. I think society's big thing right now is if you have a messy house, it means you're a great mom. And while that is probably really great advice for some people, it's really hard for people like me to be like, so then am I a bad mom if I'm still trying to keep things somewhat not chaotic? And for me, it was a mental health thing too. The anxiety increased. Because I knew then that when it did come time to clean it, it was going to be a beast. And I didn't have the energy to clean a beast. So I would say, just really take all the voices out. Just don't listen to what anyone else is telling you, no matter how well-intentioned it is, and really focus on what you need and how you can do that realistically. So break up your day and know that your child will be okay if you spend an hour picking things up and cleaning, and he loved to help. Get them involved.
Absolutely. I think that's such good advice because I'm wired like you too. I feel like I'm a worse mom when the house is messy because I have so much anxieties looking at the mess, and I feel trapped and cluttered and like the walls are caving in when there's stuff all around me. So if me spending, like you said, like an hour a day just clearing counters and putting things away, that helps tremendously. And something that's helped me too at the end of the day, because our boys go to bed pretty early, they go to bed at like 7, is that I take a big storage bucket and I walk through the house, and any toys, anything, I put in that storage bucket, and then I put it in the kids' playroom. And then in the morning, that's what they have to handle. They have to take all those toys and put them all back where they're supposed to go. But then that way, for me, when I walk through the house, I don't see all the little things. And it takes me 10 minutes just to throw something in a basket, but then they're also at that age where they can put it away. It's a little different, but.
Oh, we still have a bucket for Caleb at the bottom of the stairs. Things that I find that he hasn't put away, he hates it.
Oh, I know.
But it's so important.
It is. And it helps them too later as an adult to, and then they also learn through this process that it's just easier to put things back where they're supposed to go than just leaving them out or putting them wherever, because then too later when they want that toy, they don't know where it is because they just threw it wherever. So it also helps them with organization and taking care of their stuff, I think too.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So then before we move on, what did you do for celiac and Hashimoto's? What was your healing protocol for those?
So I am a firm believer, obviously, in clean everything. Like I don't like chemicals. I don't like unnecessary things, but I also believe that there is a place in this world for modern medicine and oils. So it's been trying to strike a balance between like natural things. But for me, I was so sick. And the first doctor I saw that could and would help me, I didn't have any problem taking that pill. So I am on levothyroxine for my thyroid. I have no problem with that. And then for celiac, no cure, gluten-free. I was super blessed. Like I said before, my mom raised me, teaching me to cook from scratch and to cook my own meals, which is so important when you have a dietary issue. But she was also diagnosed gluten intolerant when I want to say like 9. And my grandmother, as long as I can remember, she had celiac. So I was exposed to that world. I understood cross-contamination. I understood what it meant to go out to eat. So I maybe had a little bit of an easier transition than some people.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's so hard when, again, you have to block out the voices of and also seeing a doctor, I can't remember what they're called now, but the doctors who don't use any modern medicine, they're very expensive.
Yes.
And we're already paying for insurance, and we're going to use, and I don't think we could ever really afford to do that. It's just not an option for everybody.
Right.
But I don't believe doctors are villains. I don't believe, I've worked with them at my previous job. They really do have your best interests at heart. And if you're at any doubt about your doctor, if you feel like they're too pill happy, then find a different one.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then let's kind of quickly talk about this past year. So obviously this was a year of COVID. So what happened on your end?
It's been a year. So Thanksgiving of 2019, I developed shingles, which is no joke. It took me down pretty hard, and it was a 2-month recovery. So by the end of January 2020, I was feeling better. My symptoms were gone, but it wasn't even 2 weeks. And I was in the hospital with just an absolute beast of a kidney stone. It was the worst pain I've ever had in my life. Everything they gave me, nothing touched it. So they had to laser that sucker out. And that was a bit of a recovery. And so I say all that because by March, by spring break, we went camping, and we came back from camping and the world shut down. It was pretty scary. I was being very careful. We weren't going anywhere. Caleb was doing virtual. Brian was still going to work, but we weren't going anywhere other than that. But a week after spring break, I showed symptoms for the first time of COVID-19. So my symptoms didn't match what in March we believed COVID symptoms were supposed to look like. I didn't have a fever. I'd had walking pneumonia many times before. So that's kind of just the doctor's like, you just have pneumonia, you just have bronchitis. The doctor's offices are closed. Everything is telemed. Trying to get in for an x-ray took a very long time. It was about 3 weeks before we knew I had COVID. At this point, my oxygen levels had been consistently tanking, going below the acceptable level, but we didn't know that because I didn't have the finger dabby. So I knew how I felt. I didn't know why I felt that way. And they would ask, are you having difficulty breathing? And I'd go, no, I can breathe. I'm good. But I had this weird weight and this horrible sensation that you'd get all through your body. And I didn't know that that's really what they meant, that my oxygen levels were tanking at those times. So once we got the finger dabby, once my doctor figured out that I was experiencing that, she said that I would probably have to go to the hospital, which terrified me. We managed to keep me out of the hospital because at that point, we were about a month in, and I was actually starting to improve a little. So if we had figured it out sooner, I would have been hospitalized. And I don't know if that's a blessing that I wasn't or not, because the toll that lack of oxygen took on my body, we're still figuring that out. It was July before my bronchioles healed. There was so much pain. And then it was my pulmonologist who figured out that most of my symptoms were not related to my breathing. It was my heart. And I was sent to a cardiologist. And about a month after I met him, I was diagnosed with tachycardia, which is my lovely gift from COVID. It did not exist before. I had been to all those doctors leading up to COVID, so we know there was no heart issue. I think that the shingles and the kidney stones broke my already pretty weak immune system. I just didn't have anything to fight it. And then probably by Christmas, I feel like my energy came back, and it's only been a few weeks that the brain fog cleared up. Wow. So I feel like I'm weak as a kitten. I really do, but able to go out there and start rebuilding. But through all of that, as hard as it was, our community came together and was delivering boxes of food and dinners and texting and just making sure I was okay. You sent me this journal that I love these journals that write the word journals. But we discovered there was a mass on my tumor that they found while they were a mass on my tumor. Maybe my words aren't quite fixed yet. A mass on my liver that we wouldn't have seen if we weren't trying to figure out why I wasn't getting better from COVID. And eventually figured out that I have progressive liver disease, and it's because of my lifetime battle with insulin resistance and PCOS. And if you ask my doctors, I've always managed the two very well. My numbers have been good, so it wasn't like I neglected them. It's just, it takes a toll. And so that's been hard. It's because I'm so young. My doctor feels, again, it's pretty inevitable that I'll experience liver failure at some point. So just the better I can manage it, because there's no cure, the longer I can put that off. So it's like being hit by a Mack truck. It really is. You're not expecting that. I'm 39. So that's why I feel like 40 will be my decade.
Yeah.
However, because of that, I have to stop treatment for my PCOS because half my liver is, this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease issue, and the other half is covered in really big tumors. And the hormones I was taking for PCOS caused the tumors. So far they haven't shrunk, but they haven't grown since I've stopped. But unfortunately, not treating PCOS means that my insulin resistance is harder to control. My weight will keep going up, which makes the insulin resistance worse, which makes the liver worse. It was awful to wrap my head around. I think I've managed it. I was terrified that I was going to become the 600-pound woman. I didn't know how to avoid that. Talked to a friend who's a nutritionist. I'm off of sugar completely. So I was always, before being gluten-free, an advocate of just moderation. Don't cut anything out of your diet. Don't follow the trends. Just moderation. That's the perfect diabetic diet, right? So even though I didn't eat a lot of sugar, I always had it. And so cutting that out completely, cutting my carbs down to 100 to 120 a day. My weight isn't going down, but it's not going up. So for now it's working. Yeah. So it's been a year. I ended up with shingles again, less than a year after the first one. And I'm now looking at potential kidney issues and think they've ruled out it's not related to COVID. It's potentially maybe from the insulin resistance, probably not. We really don't know. So, my next step is an immunologist. So, this is 2020 for me.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Gosh. So I know that, I mean, obviously, because we met at church, I know that you are a Christian and you do have faith. So then you are experiencing a lot this past year and, health wise for a while, but especially this past year and a half seems to have been, it would take anybody down to their knees. So how are you able to get through all of it?
Um, well, God, I mean, it sounds so cliche and so corny. I've had so much peace. Um, it's so true that, it's a peace that I don't think a non-believer could even understand if you don't experience it. And I didn't have this peace always, and just community, just to be surrounded by so many people who love me and who care. And I had a prayer circle on my front lawn one day. I've had um, I feel the love. I don't know how I'd get through it otherwise. And then my husband, I've said it before, he's a saint. What I can't do, he picks up and he does, and he takes care of me and fills in with Caleb as much as he can. I will say that it's probably really awesome that I have a 13-year-old right now. He's a lot less dependent on me for everyday kind of things. And he's a great cook, so he can handle it in the kitchen when needs be. Um, but I don't know how people walk through life and walk through trauma and tragedy and just difficulties without community and without God, because that's the only thing that keeps me going.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of I think to a lot of people, not necessarily Christians, but I would say Christians included in that, would maybe then question God and say, why are you doing this to me? Why are you allowing this to happen to me? Have you experienced a little bit of that where you've kind of just dropped down to your knees and asked God that?
The only time that I really did that was when we were trying to get pregnant a second time. All I'd ever wanted was to be a mom. We wanted all the kids. And so it wasn't that I necessarily questioned him, but I did feel like I was being punished. I wasn't in a good place in my relationship with God, and that I don't think I really had one. I didn't know what that looked like until I absolutely tanked, until my depression and anxiety put me into an incredibly dark place. And I had to embrace that God loves me, that I am his daughter, that he loves me for who I am. And the peace that I got from that is just overwhelming. And it's a sensation I hope I never lose. But because I wasn't there yet when we went through infertility the second time, I did feel like he was punishing me, that I had done something wrong, or I hadn't parented Caleb well enough to be blessed with another. And that's the only time I think I experienced that. And I don't feel that way anymore.
That's good.
And I think for me too, it's just a conscious, I'm not gonna know in this life why I didn't get to have more kids, or why I have to be this kind of sick. All I know is that if my story can help anybody get through theirs a little bit quicker, or find encouragement, or know like I'm not crazy, there's other people like me, then I want that to be my story. Like that I could maybe I went through this for that reason. And I didn't have more kids, maybe because God knew how sick I was going to be. And maybe I have celiac so that I can now help Caleb, who has celiac. He's not walking this alone. His mom is walking with him. I don't know.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it, friend, because that's exactly why I wanted to do this podcast, was because your story and many others is so powerful, and your reliance on God and the strength that you get from him, but also just sharing that with others, that if it reaches one person, and then they know that they're not alone, and that they know that, you know, it just, if it reaches one person, then it's worth it. And I'm just so thankful that you're sharing all of it, and you're sharing your story. And he is the good, good father, and he has only the best in store for us. And yes, we're going to experience trials and sickness and sorrow, but he knows what is best, and he knows that it's going to strengthen us. And I'm just, I'm just in awe of you, friend. Really.
I would say the same, because I don't know a lot of people who can relate on the levels, on the same level. And so it's nice not to be alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, on that note, we're going to ask the 3 questions that I ask everybody on the podcast. What are you reading? What are you loving? And what is making you laugh?
Okay, so you're gonna laugh. Can I show you what I'm reading? Hold
Yes,
on.
ma'am.
I brought them because it's a visual.
Okay.
I don't ever just read books.
I know you don't. I know you don't.
So it depends where I am. In fact, in my car, which isn't here, I have a book on the history of the woman who settled the Canadian prairies that I read in the car line. That's
Yes.
my reading.
Yes.
In the living room, I have this one, and it's the history of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because I have been obsessed with them as long as I can remember. They have the best uniform of all uniforms. It's ridiculous. I'm reading Be Amazed. This is the Bible study I'm doing at church. It's really good. It's about the prophet Jeremiah, and oh my gosh. Like, part of what I love about history is there's nothing new in this world. People have been the same forever. And there's so much in this book that it feels super relevant today. I guess you could probably always say that, but it's good. Yeah. And then I've always got my history of Egypt. That's what I studied. Always reading that. And then I'm rereading this gem, Heaven, by Randy Alcorn. I'm not going to say that everything in here I believe is 100% accurate, but the Bible talks about heaven endlessly. And it's not angels on clouds with harps. And I love reading about what the Bible actually says heaven will be. That's our hope. That's where I know I'm going. And I just find so much joy and peace in reading about it. So I love this book.
Yeah.
So that's my reading.
Okay.
What was the second one?
What are you loving?
It's accessories. It's always accessories. I like purses and earrings and hair things, and what I like isn't generally what everybody else likes, but I kind of like being different. So yeah, my favorite purse is it's a Triceratops. So
so the last one, what is making you laugh?
Oh, it's my puppy.
Yeah.
Always. She's not even a puppy, but she is, she'll perpetually be a puppy because she's so tiny and she just looks like a baby dog always. And she's hilarious.
Now tell everyone what kind of dog she is.
So she's a Morkie. So she's part Maltese and part Yorkie. She's 7 pounds soaking wet. She is small, but she has an attitude and a personality, and she's funny. Like, Brian and I will just find ourselves giggling every night at her antics. And yes, and I think, she was my constant companion when I was sick. I mean, it was probably 8 months after COVID before I could walk across a room without being breathless, but she was always right there with me. It's just,
friend, I said this over and over. I love you dearly, dearly, dearly. And I'm just so grateful that you are willing and able and open to share your story. And I know for a fact that this is going to encourage somebody who has had a similar experience, or someone who has walked the same walk that you have, so they know that they're not alone, or maybe this opened their eyes to something that they're experiencing but they just didn't have a diagnosis for, or didn't have a name for something. So I think you were placed here obviously for a purpose and a reason, and sharing your story is definitely on that list. So thank you.
Well, thank you, because I've always wanted to encourage and help people in similar spots, and it's not easy to know where to do that. So thank you for giving me a voice.
Thank you for listening to the Go and Tell podcast with Lauren Greci. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe, comment, leave a review, and share with your friends. Music was created for the show by Matt Bowen, and I'm your host, Lauren Greci. I'll be back here next week with another great conversation. Thanks for listening today, friends.